It started on a Wednesday morning, the kind of morning that looked ordinary from the outside. Blue skies, the smell of fresh-cut grass from the football field, the rhythmic chant of cheerleaders rehearsing behind the bleachers. Everything at Jefferson High seemed perfectly in place. Until it wasn't. Ariana Cole adjusted the hem of her new cheer uniform, her heart thumping fast but steady. She had transferred here just 2 weeks ago, the new girl from Virginia, a sophomore trying to blend in. The uniform fit a little tight, the colors bold red and silver school pride stitched across her chest. She smiled faintly as she tied her ponytail higher. She was used to being the outsider. But this time she wanted to belong. Coach Brenda Lang's whistle pierced through the air. "All right, girls, let's see that pyramid again." Ariana took her place at the base, locking hands with Madison Blake, who immediately pulled away, her expression sharp. "Watch your grip," Madison muttered. "You almost made me fall last time." Ariana frowned. "I didn't touch you," she said quietly, but her voice was lost in the shuffle. The squad regrouped, laughter and whispers, floating like static around her. Chloe Patterson, the team captain, tossed her blonde hair and smirked. "Let's not make excuses, okay? If you can't keep up, maybe Jefferson High isn't your kind of school." The words were coated with sweetness, but the sting underneath was deliberate. The other girls giggled, not loudly, but enough to let Ariana know she'd been marked. Still, she said nothing. Just nodded, adjusted her footing, and lifted the next flyer with perfect form. The move was clean, strong, balanced. But Chloe didn't clap. Neither did Madison. They just exchanged a look, the kind that said, "This isn't over." When practice ended, Ariana lingered, picking up stray pom-poms scattered on the field. The sun burned low behind the goalposts. A breeze rolled in, carrying faint voices from the locker area, her name. "She thinks she's better than us," Chloe was saying. "She's only here because Coach wants diversity points," Madison added, her voice snide. A pause, then laughter. "Wait till Friday. We'll make sure she remembers her place." Ariana froze, the words carving through her like a blade. She stayed quiet, waiting until the voices faded. Then she exhaled, slow and steady, training her body to stay calm. Her father had taught her that years ago: control the breath, control the fear. At home, the air felt different, safer. The faint hum of the ceiling fan, the smell of Renee's cooking, the faint sound of Derek's heavy boots by the door. Her father was home early for once. Derek Cole didn't look like the kind of man who ever blended in. Broad shoulders, calm eyes, and that quiet authority that followed him wherever he went. Most people saw him as just another retired serviceman. Only a few knew the truth: 20 years as a Navy SEAL, half of them in classified operations that never made the news. He noticed Ariana's silence the moment she walked in. "Hey, champ," he said, setting down his duffel bag. "How was practice?" She forced a small smile. "Fine." He studied her face. "You sure about that?" Her smile faltered. "Just normal stuff. New girl things." He nodded slowly, but didn't push. "Remember what I told you: never let other people decide who you are." Ariana nodded, but her eyes stayed down. She wanted to believe that. She really did. That night, her phone buzzed an anonymous text. "Hope you're ready for Friday. Fake cheerleader." Then another. "Bet your dad couldn't buy you real talent." And a third, a picture. Her locker covered in red paint. She stared at the screen, her chest tightening. But instead of crying, she locked her phone and placed it face down on the desk. Her father's words echoed again: control the breath, control the fear. Friday came faster than she expected. The pep rally was the biggest event of the month, a gym packed with students, the marching band booming, the cheerleaders lined up front and center. Ariana's heart pounded as she waited in formation. She told herself it would be fine. She'd practiced every routine. She knew every count. The music started, the crowd cheered, and for a few minutes everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. During The final stunt, when Ariana was supposed to take the center stage toss, Madison's hands slipped. The base faltered. Ariana was thrown off balance mid-air. She hit the mat hard, not enough to break bones, but enough to draw gasps from the crowd. Chloe's voice rang out, mocking concern. "Oh no, guess someone needs more practice." The laughter spread through the gym like wildfire. Students whispered, cameras flashed, someone shouted, "Nice try, new girl." Ariana's face burned. She forced herself up, her body trembling not from pain but from humiliation. Coach Lang ran over, helping her to her feet. "You okay?" Ariana nodded mutely. "Yeah, I'm fine." But she wasn't, and she knew it wasn't an accident. After the rally, the girls disappeared into the locker room. Ariana stayed behind, trying to steady her breathing. That's when she saw it, her backpack, torn open, its contents dumped across the bleachers, her phone, her notebook. And in the middle, a paper sign, "Go back where you belong." She didn't cry, not once. She just gathered her things, one by one, her movements slow and deliberate. But what none of the girls noticed, not Chloe, not Madison, was the figure standing near the exit doors of the gym. A man in a gray cap and sunglasses, arms crossed, watching. Derek Cole had come to surprise his daughter. He'd planned to watch quietly from the crowd, but what he saw instead made his blood run cold. He said nothing as he left. Nothing at all. But his jaw tightened, the kind of stillness that meant something was already forming in his mind. Something precise. Something unstoppable. That evening, Ariana sat on the porch, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Her father joined her silently, setting down 2 mugs of hot cocoa. She didn't speak first, he did. "I saw what happened today." Her breath hitched. "You were there?" He nodded. "Yeah, I was." She looked down, ashamed. "I didn't want you to see that." He leaned back, his voice calm but firm. "You think falling in front of a crowd makes you weak? You got up. That's strength. But what I saw wasn't just bullying, Ariana. It was deliberate. And that means it's my problem now." Her eyes widened. "Dad, please." He raised a hand, stopping her. "I'm not going to fight your battles, but I'm also not going to let someone break you down for who you are." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence between them. Then Derek said something she didn't expect. "Tomorrow morning, you're coming with me. Training starts at 600. She blinked. "Training?" He nodded, a faint grin breaking his serious face. "You wanted to be strong, right? Let's make sure you can handle whatever comes next." The next morning was brutal. Cold air, dew on the grass. The sound of Derek's commands echoing across the backyard. Again, breathe steady. Don't tense up. Use your balance. He wasn't yelling, his tone was measured, like a teacher refining every move. Push-ups, footwork, agility drills, not punishment, but preparation. And through it all, Ariana didn't quit, not once. After the last drill, Derek handed her a bottle of water and smiled faintly. "You've got heart, kid. Most people fold when it hurts, you don't." She smiled for the first time in days. "Guess I got that from you." He chuckled. "Maybe. But you're gonna need more than that. You're gonna need to stay sharp. Not everything's solved with strength." She nodded, not realizing that he was already planning something, not revenge, but exposure. By Monday, rumors were spreading. Someone had leaked the locker incident photo to the school's private forum. But the caption wasn't what Chloe expected. It read, "Who thinks it's funny to humiliate the only person actually doing the work?" Anonymous posts began flooding, in students questioning the accident, teachers rewatching rally footage, even parents demanding answers. For the first time, Chloe's smug control began to crack. At lunch, Ariana walked into the cafeteria. The usual whispers trailed behind her, but fewer laughs followed. She could feel eyes on her. Mixed looks, pity from some, guilt from others. Chloe sat at the popular table, pretending not to notice. But she did. She always noticed. Madison leaned close to her. "You think she's behind the posts?" Chloe shook her head. "She's too scared." Probably her mom or something. But she was wrong, because somewhere across town, Derek Cole was at his laptop, eyes narrowed, tracing the digital footprint of the anonymous account that had sent Ariana those threats. And what he found made his jaw clench harder than ever. It wasn't just bullying. It was premeditated harassment, fake profiles, group chats, shared photos, organized by none other than Chloe Patterson herself. He stared at the evidence for a long time, then quietly picked up the phone. "Detective Mason? It's Cole. We need to talk." Detective Cole Mason sat across from Derek Cole inside a quiet coffee shop on Main Street. The place was half empty, the kind of spot where conversations stayed private. Mason had known Derek for years. They'd trained together, briefly before their careers split in different directions. Mason joined local law enforcement. Derek joined the Navy SEALs. Now they met again, under circumstances that stirred the same intensity both men once carried on active duty. "What's this about, Derek?" Mason asked, stirring his black coffee. "You sounded urgent." Derek slid a small flash drive across the table. "Take a look at what's on there before you ask anything." "Organized," Derek added. "Your department needs to intervene before this goes any further." Mason leaned back, exhaling. "I can't open a formal case without a victim's complaint." "She's 16, Derek said flatly. "She's not filing paperwork while they're planning to humiliate her again." Mason studied him. "You want me to look into the parents?" "I want you to find whoever's feeding this fire," Derek replied. "Because these kids aren't doing it alone." Monday afternoon brought another round of whispers through Jefferson High's halls. Chloe Patterson walked proudly, chin high, the sound of her designer sneakers sharp against the polished floor. But under the confidence was a tremor. Students, we're talking not just about Ariana, but about the video. Someone had uploaded a clip from Friday's rally slow-motion footage of Madison slipping. The caption read, "Accident or setup." Coach Lang called an emergency meeting. "This isn't what our team stands for," she said, pacing the gym floor. "Whoever leaked that video better speak up before the principal gets involved." Chloe raised her hand innocently. "Coach, we all know it was just a mistake. I mean, people trip." Ariana stayed silent, standing a few feet away, her posture composed. Her gaze met Chloe's, not angry, not fearful, just steady. That quiet strength unsettled Chloe more than any shout could have. When practice ended, Chloe waited outside near the parking lot. She saw Ariana walking alone and followed, her voice sweetly taunting. "Hey, new girl. You think you're slick posting fake videos?" Ariana turned slowly. "I didn't post anything." "Please," Chloe sneered. "Everyone knows it. Was you." "You mean everyone in your group chat?" Ariana replied. Her tone was calm, but the words hit like a strike. Chloe froze. "What did you just say?" "I said you should be careful what you post. Things have a way of getting traced." For the first time, Chloe's perfect smile faltered. She stormed off, pretending not to care. But her hands shook as she texted Madison under the bleachers. "We have a problem." That evening, Derek received a call. Mason's tone was low but charged. "You were right," he said. "The account posting those pictures? It's linked to an IP address registered under Robert Patterson. That name ring a bell?" "Chloe's father," Derek replied. "Local attorney, big name around here. The school board knows him." "Then he's protecting his daughter," Derek said. Calling Mason hesitated. "You sure you want me to keep digging? This'll rattle the town." Derek's answer was immediate. "Dig." Tuesday morning, Ariana woke up to find her social media accounts flooded with supportive messages. "Ignore them, girl. You didn't deserve that. We saw the video there." Done but mixed between the encouragement was one chilling message from an unknown number. "Snitches get what's coming." Friday night, game field. Ariana's stomach tightened. She showed it to her father without saying a word. He read it once, twice, then looked up, expression unreadable. "Stay focused," he said softly. "You're not skipping that game." She blinked. "What? You can't be serious." He nodded. "The only thing bullies understand is exposure. They want to humiliate you in public. Let's give them a crowd but not the ending they expect. She didn't understand what he meant then, but by Friday night she would. Friday arrived heavy with anticipation. The school stadium glowed under floodlights. Families filled the bleachers, band drums thundering through the crisp autumn air. In the locker room, Chloe tightened her ponytail in the mirror, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach. Madison whispered, "You sure about this?" "Relax," Chloe snapped. "We just switch her cue card. She messes up the chant, everyone laughs, she quits. That's it." But she didn't notice the small black lens wedged behind the vent, a wireless micro camera Derek had placed earlier that afternoon. Outside, Derek sat quietly in his truck, phone connected to a live feed. His eyes flicked to the monitor. Patience. When the halftime show began, the squad took the field. The music blared, every movement rehearsed. But halfway through, Ariana noticed something was wrong. The cue card in her hand had different steps than yesterday's. She glanced up, seeing Chloe's smirk from across the formation. For a split second, Ariana hesitated. Then she made a choice. She tossed the card aside and led the chant from memory. Her voice rang clear, strong, unwavering. The crowd erupted in cheers following her rhythm. The routine didn't collapse, it soared. Chloe's face drained of color. Madison stumbled. The formation broke. By the end of the routine, Ariana stood alone at the center, not humiliated but victorious. The applause thundered. Phones recorded. Derek smiled faintly from the stands, but he knew it wasn't over. After the game, as the crowd dispersed, Chloe and Madison stormed toward the locker room. They never noticed Mason waiting near the exit with two uniformed officers. "Chloe Patterson?" he called. She turned, startled. Yeah?" He held up a printed photo. "Recognize this?" It was a screenshot of her message. Friday night. Game field. Her mouth went dry. That's not me." Mason's voice stayed even. "We traced the account to your father's home network. You might want to call him." Moments later, Robert Patterson arrived, red-faced and angry. "This is harassment. My daughter's a minor." Mason handed him a folder. So was the victim. Derek stepped forward from the shadows, calm but firm. "Your daughter targeted mine for weeks. You knew. You did nothing." Robert bristled. "Watch your tone, Mr. Cole." Derek's gaze didn't waver. "I'm watching my daughter's back. Something you should have tried." The silence that followed was heavy enough to cut through the night. Chloe stared at the ground, realization dawning that her father couldn't talk his way out of this. Mason's officers confiscated the phone. "We'll need this for evidence." Robert turned to Mason. "You can't charge her over childish mistakes." Mason's reply was quiet, measured. When those mistakes involve threats and harassment across state-regulated networks, they stop being childish. Back home, Ariana sat on the couch, her hands clasped around a cup of cocoa. Derek entered, removing his jacket, his expression softer now. "You did good tonight," he said. She looked up. "Even with everything?" "Especially with everything." He sat beside her. "Strength isn't about winning the fight. It's about knowing when to stand and when to let the truth speak." She smiled faintly. "So what happens now?" "Now," he said, "the system handles it. And if it doesn't, I will." But the story didn't end that weekend. By Monday morning, Jefferson High buzzed like a hornet's nest. News spread that the police had questioned Chloe and her father. Some students deleted their old posts, others apologized. Coach Lang announced new team policies and suspended Chloe indefinitely. During lunch, Ariana walked through the halls. For the first time since she'd arrived, people stepped aside, not out of fear but respect. A few nodded. Some even clapped quietly as she passed. Still, she didn't gloat. She just smiled politely and kept walking. But there was one more moment, waiting for her that day. Outside the school gates, Derek was waiting in his truck. She climbed in, closing the door softly. "You knew everything would work out," she said. He shook his head. No, I just knew what truth looks like when you let it breathe. Ariana glanced out the window, watching students scatter under the autumn light. Dad? She asked after a pause. Does being brave ever stop feeling scary? He smiled gently. Never. It just stops controlling you. That night, Mason called again. The prosecutor's office wants your statement, he said. And Derek, there's talk about starting an anti-bullying initiative at the district level. They want you involved. Derek was silent for a long time. If it helps another kid, I'm in. He hung up and looked toward the hallway where Ariana's bedroom door was half open. She was asleep, the glow of her bedside lamp spilling across a pile of school books. He exhaled slowly, relief, pride, and something deeper, maybe hope? Because in a world that often looked ready to tear people apart, one young cheerleader had reminded an entire town what quiet courage really looked like. And for a father who'd fought battles all over the world, that was victory enough. By Tuesday morning, Jefferson High wasn't just a school anymore. It was the center of a storm. Local reporters waited outside the gates, microphones ready, lenses flashing whenever a student walked past. The video of Ariana's halftime performance had gone viral. Tens of thousands of views, hundreds of comments, most praising her grace. Under pressure, some condemning the school's silence. Inside, Principal Andrew Collins stared at his computer screen, his jaw tight. Emails from parents, demands for accountability, district officials asking questions he didn't have answers for. The words, investigation and liability, appeared too many times to ignore. He rubbed his temples as the office door swung open. Coach Brenda Lang stood there holding a folder. Sir, she said quietly, you'll want to see this. He opened the folder. Inside were screenshots not of the locker vandalism or the texts, but of comments made by Chloe's father, Robert Patterson, in a private community group. Kids need to learn their place. Maybe some people don't belong on every team. Collins looked up, his voice low. He posted these publicly? Brenda nodded grimly. Last night, it's all over town now. He sank back in his chair. This is getting out of control. Meanwhile, in the Patterson household, the atmosphere was even worse. Robert paced the living room, phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp. I want that video taken down immediately. My daughter is being slandered. The man on the other end, a local journalist, responded coolly. Sir, the footage came from a public event. The people have a right to know. Robert hung up furiously, turning to Chloe. You see what you've done? You've embarrassed this family. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't think it would go this far. He cut her off. You just thought your actions didn't have consequences. Well, now they do. But what Robert didn't realize was that his attempt to intimidate the school board would trigger something far greater, an internal review, one that would pull back the curtain on the school's quiet culture of favoritism and cover-ups. That same afternoon, Derek received a call from Detective Mason. Brace yourself, Mason said. Patterson filed a harassment complaint against you. Derek didn't even flinch. On what grounds? He claims you hacked into his network and violated his privacy. He's using his law license to push it into the county docket. Derek was silent for a long moment, then spoke quietly. Then we'll let the facts speak. He hung up, his calm surface betraying no anger. But underneath, his mind had already started working methodical, tactical, the same way it did during reconnaissance missions years ago. He retrieved a small case from the top shelf of his study closet. Inside, organized neatly, were several memory drives, each labeled with precise dates. Every encounter, every text, every incident had been logged not as revenge but as precaution. A Navy SEAL never entered a field without evidence. That evening, the local news ran a segment titled, Bullying Scandal at Jefferson High, Who's Responsible? Clips of Ariana's fall at the rally played beside an interview with parents demanding reform. One line from a community leader stood out. This isn't just about one girl. It's about what happens when silence protects the wrong people. Ariana watched from the couch, her knees pulled close, her mother beside her. Renee reached over, brushing her daughter's arm. You didn't ask for any of this, she said softly. I know, Ariana whispered. But maybe it's supposed to happen. Renee looked at her, puzzled. Dad always says every mission has a reason, Ariana said. Maybe this one's mine. Upstairs, Derek listened from the hallway, proud but worried. He'd spent a lifetime fighting enemies he could see. This was different. This one wore a smile, a title, and a polished tie. By Thursday, the county courthouse had received the Patterson complaint. Mason called again. He's serious, Derek. He wants a restraining order. Derek's tone was steady. Good. Then he'll have to sit across from me and explain his evidence, something he doesn't have. Mason chuckled quietly. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Not even close, Derek replied. But truth doesn't need defense, it needs daylight. That daylight came sooner than expected. Friday morning, Derek and Ariana arrived at the courthouse. The air inside buzzed with tension. Reporters lined the lobby, cameras poised. Robert Patterson stood near the front, surrounded by attorneys, his expression hard and self-assured. When he saw Derek, he smiled thinly. Hope you like courtrooms, Mr. Cole. They can be quite humbling. Derek's voice was calm, almost quiet. I've been in worse places. Inside the hearing room, the judge reviewed the file. Patterson's lawyer delivered a confident opening. Your Honor, my client's daughter has been the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by Mr. Cole, who unlawfully obtained data from their private devices. The judge turned to Derek. Mr. Cole, do you have counsel? Derek stood. No, Your Honor. I represent myself. Then I hope you understand the seriousness of these allegations. I do, Derek said evenly, and I have evidence proving they're false. He stepped forward, placing a small tablet on the desk. On the screen played security footage, the same footage from the cheer locker, time-stamped, showing Chloe and Madison discussing the setup, laughing about the red paint on Ariana's locker. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Patterson's lawyer tried to object, but the judge held up a hand. Continue, she said. Derek clicked to the next file, the group chat logs, traced through public IPs, the harassment messages linked directly to devices registered under Robert Patterson's home network. And finally, the last piece, the email Patterson had sent to the school board, pressuring them to handle the issue quietly before it reached the media. When the clip ended, the courtroom was silent. Derek spoke softly. I didn't hack anyone, Your Honor. I simply knew where bullies like to hide behind their Wi-Fi and their privilege. The judge leaned forward, her tone measured. Mr. Patterson, do you have an explanation for this? Robert's face flushed red. This is taken out of context. Context, the judge said dryly, doesn't change timestamps or messages. Case dismissed. The gavel hit the block with a sharp crack. Patterson's shoulders sagged. His lawyer avoided eye contact. Derek turned to Ariana, who sat quietly behind him, her hands clasped tight. He nodded once. It was over, at least for now. By the next week, the fallout spread through the county like wildfire. The district superintendent announced an independent review of Jefferson High's leadership. Coach Lang was reinstated with commendation for her cooperation. Principal Collins issued a public apology to the student body, standing beside Ariana on the auditorium stage. His voice trembled slightly. We failed to protect one of our own, and for that I am deeply sorry. The students applauded not loudly but sincerely. For once it wasn't performance. It was acknowledgement. Ariana stood at the podium, hesitant at first, then found her voice. I don't want to be remembered for what happened, she said. I want people to remember that standing up doesn't mean shouting. Sometimes it just means not backing down. Her words echoed through the room, soft but steady, the kind of words that stick longer than cheers. That afternoon, a small ceremony was held on the football field. The cheer team presented Ariana with a new uniform, stitched with her name and the phrase, "Never back down." Even Madison, pale and tear-eyed, approached her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have stopped her. Ariana looked at her for a long moment. Then start now. Stop someone else. Madison nodded, her voice trembling. I will. Later that evening, Derek stood outside the stadium, watching the sun set behind the bleachers. Mason joined him, hands in his pockets. You know, Mason said, you could have just called the media and let them do the work. Derek smiled faintly. And let them turn it into a headline instead of a lesson? Mason nodded thoughtfully. So what's next for you, Commander Cole? Just Derek now, he replied. And next? I've been asked to help the district build a program for crisis response, training teachers how to recognize targeted harassment before it explodes. Mason raised an eyebrow. Going back to the field, huh? Derek's grin deepened. Different battlefield. Same mission. That night, Ariana sat by her window journaling quietly. The sound of crickets filled the space between thoughts. She wrote slowly, her handwriting neat but firm. I used to think courage meant winning. Now I think it just means standing when you want to hide. They tried to make me feel small, but I learned small doesn't mean powerless. She closed the notebook, exhaling softly. Outside, the streetlights hummed, calm and steady, a reminder that peace sometimes follows the loudest storms. Downstairs, Derek and Renee sat together, their living room finally quiet again. She's changed, Renee said softly. Derek nodded. She had to. We all did. For the first time in weeks, they laughed together. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was real again. A week later, Jefferson High held its first anti-bullying assembly. Local press, parents, and district officials packed the gym. When the superintendent introduced Derek Cole as guest speaker, a hush fell over the crowd. He stepped up to the microphone, his presence calm but commanding. I've spent most of my life in silence, he began. Because in my line of work, silence saves lives. But there's a different kind of silence that kills the silence of people who see wrong and say nothing. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. If we teach our kids anything, let it be this. Strength isn't in how loud you shout. It's in how you stand when the world tries to push you down. Applause rose, slow and deliberate, spreading like a wave. Ariana watched from the front row, pride swelling quietly in her chest. When the crowd dispersed, Chloe and her mother approached him, hesitant. Chloe's eyes were red from crying. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek studied her for a long moment. I believe you are, he said. But make sure your actions say it louder. She nodded, clutching her mother's hand, and walked away. Mason approached afterward, holding out a folder. Thought you'd want a copy of the final report. All charges against your family are cleared. Patterson's law license is suspended pending review. Derek took the folder quietly. Justice has a way of finding its way home. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold, Ariana and Derek took a walk down their quiet street. You know, she said, I used to hate being the new girl. He smiled. And now? Now I think maybe being new means being strong enough to start over. He nodded, pride in his eyes. That's my girl. The sound of cicadas filled the warm evening air, and for the first time since it all began, Ariana felt the weight lift completely. Not because she had won, but because she had stood her ground and refused to be broken. It started with a headline. 3 words that changed everything. Navy SEAL father exposes school bullies. By sunrise, it was everywhere, morning shows, news sites, talk radio. Photos of Ariana in her red and silver cheer uniform flashed across TV screens next to stock images of American flags and school gymnasiums. Reporters called it the perfect story of courage and justice. Derek Cole didn't like the attention. He'd spent half his life in shadows, where the mission mattered more than the recognition. But now the spotlight found him, and it wasn't going away. Renee read the article aloud at breakfast, her tone cautious. They're calling you a hero, she said. Derek sipped his coffee, unimpressed. Heroes don't trend online. Ariana smiled faintly. You went viral, Dad. You're basically famous. He shook his head. Fame's just noise. What matters is what comes after. She nodded quietly, but part of her couldn't help feeling proud. For weeks she had been the target of cruelty. Now people were celebrating her strength. But in the back of her mind she knew not everyone was celebrating. By mid-morning, reporters gathered outside Jefferson High. Camera vans lined the street, microphones ready for anyone willing to talk. Coach Brenda Lang tried to keep order, but the media had a rhythm of its own. Coach, can you comment on the bullying scandal? Did the district ignore prior complaints? Was there favoritism on the cheer team? She waved them off. No comments. School business stays at school. Inside the main office, Principal Collins watched the chaos through the blinds. We're supposed to be a learning institution, he muttered, not a headline. His secretary hesitated. Sir, CNN just requested an interview with Mr. Cole and his daughter. They're calling it Courage Under Fire. Collins sighed. Of course they are. That afternoon, a small film crew parked outside the Coles' modest home. Ariana peeked through the curtain. "They're here," she whispered. Renee frowned. "We don't owe them anything." But Derek was already putting on his jacket. "Let's at least hear them out." The reporter introduced herself, a woman named Samantha Boyd, polite, professional, and careful with her words. "Mr. Cole, the country wants to hear your story," she said. "You've inspired a lot of parents." He studied her for a long moment before answering. "This isn't about me. It's about what happens when adults forget to protect kids. My daughter stood alone until she didn't have to." Samantha nodded, scribbling notes. "And Ariana," she said gently, turning toward her. "What gave you the strength to face them?" Ariana hesitated. "I guess I stopped wanting to disappear. I decided to exist louder." That single line, "I decided to exist louder," became the quote every outlet replayed for days. Hashtags flooded social media. Schools across the country invited her to speak virtually about resilience. But the louder her story grew, the more resistance it drew. A week later, the first wave of criticism hit. Online commentators called Derek overprotective, claiming he'd militarized a school dispute. Others accused Ariana of playing the victim for attention. Eric ignored most of it until a familiar name appeared on a blog post: Robert Patterson. The disgraced attorney had decided to fight back. He released a statement blaming sensational media manipulation for ruining his family's reputation. The article ended with a direct jab. "The Coles aren't heroes. They're opportunists exploiting public sympathy." When Derek read it, he said nothing. He simply closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. Ariana looked at him anxiously. "He's still trying to hurt us." He nodded once. "That's what people do when they lose power. They shout into the wind." But Mason wasn't as calm. "That man's one interview away from rewriting history," he said over the phone. "If he spreads enough noise, public perception flips." "Then we answer with truth," Derek replied. "And if truth isn't enough, then we remind them who we are." 2 days later, Derek received an invitation to appear on America Now, one of the nation's most watched evening talk shows. The producers wanted both him and Ariana to discuss the impact of bullying in modern schools. Renee hesitated. "You think this is a good idea?" "Not for me," Derek said. "But it might help someone else's kid." Ariana smiled nervously. "Guess we're going on TV." The studio lights were bright, the stage colder than she expected. The host, a well-known journalist named David Harmon, greeted them warmly but with an edge of curiosity. "Commander Cole," he began, "you've become something of a symbol for parents across America. But some people say your tactics were too extreme. Were you trying to make an example out of this school?" Derek's tone stayed measured. "If standing up for my daughter is extreme, maybe more parents should be." The audience applauded softly. Harmon turned to Ariana. "And you, Ariana, how did it feel knowing the world was watching?" She hesitated, her voice quiet but sure. "It felt heavy. But if someone else sees it and realizes they're not alone, it's worth it." When the segment ended, Harmon shook Derek's hand. "Powerful stuff. You've changed how people talk about accountability." Derek smiled faintly. "That's all we wanted." Back home, messages poured in. Teachers, parents, even other students from around the country, all thanking them for speaking up. But not everyone was grateful. Late one night, a rock shattered the Coles mailbox. A piece of paper was taped to it. "Go back to hiding." Renee's hands trembled as she read it. Ariana's eyes filled with tears. Derek simply picked up the rock, examined it, and placed it on the porch railing. "They want fear," he said quietly. "We won't give it to them." He installed cameras the next morning, every angle covered. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just about one message, it was a symptom of something bigger. The following week, the County Board of Education held an open forum. Community members packed the auditorium, half applauding the Coles, half demanding the media circus end. One parent stood up. "My daughter's tired of being called a bully just because she's on the cheer team." Another shouted back, "Maybe teach her to be kind then." The room erupted. Voices collided, anger spilling over decades of unspoken tension about race, privilege, and power. At the back, Derek waited patiently until his name was called. When he stepped to the microphone, the noise dimmed. "I didn't come here to argue," he began. "I came to remind everyone what this is really about." A 16-year-old girl was targeted, humiliated, and told she didn't belong. If that doesn't make every adult in this room uncomfortable, it should. He looked around the room, eyes steady. "This isn't about sides. It's about standards. The standard of decency we owe every kid who walks into that building. A long silence followed before the applause started slow at first, then building. Even some of the parents who'd come to oppose him clapped quietly. By the end of the month, Jefferson County launched the Stand Tall initiative, a district-wide anti-bullying campaign co-led by Derek Cole and Coach Brenda Lang. Ariana was invited to help design the student portion. She called it the Loud Room, a space where students could report harassment anonymously, without fear of retaliation. Reporters covered the launch, calling it a blueprint for cultural change. For Derek, it was simple. If you want to protect kids, start by listening to them. But just as the media began to shift its attention elsewhere, something unexpected happened. Late one evening, Mason called again, his voice tight. "Derek, you need to see this." He sent over a shaky cell phone footage filmed outside a downtown cafe. Robert Patterson was there, speaking to a group of men, his voice raised. "Cole ruined my career. If he thinks this is over, he's mistaken." Derek watched silently, his expression unreadable. Mason exhaled. "You want to press charges for threats?" "No," Derek said calmly. "Let him talk. Every word digs his hole deeper," Mason chuckled. "You always did prefer strategy over retaliation." "Strategy wins wars," Derek said. "And this one's already over." A month later, Patterson's public meltdown finally caught up to him. His law firm terminated his partnership, citing unprofessional conduct. He was suspended indefinitely from the state bar. The story barely made headlines this time. The world had moved on. For the Coles, peace returned quietly. The mailbox was replaced. The reporters stopped calling. Ariana's life began to resemble something normal again: practice, homework, laughter. One afternoon, she came home holding a small envelope. Inside was a letter on Jefferson High stationery. "Dear Ariana, the cheer team voted unanimously to make you next year's captain. You earned it." She stared at the words for a long time before whispering, "They mean it?" Renee smiled. "Looks like they finally caught up to you." When Derek came home that evening, Ariana handed him the letter. He read it once, then looked at her, his voice soft but proud. "Leadership isn't about being loudest. It's about showing people how to rise. You've done that." She hugged him tightly, the kind of hug that carried everything they'd survived: the humiliation, the courtroom, the spotlight, the fear, and the quiet victory that came after. Weeks turned into months. The story faded from the news cycle, replaced by newer scandals and faster outrage. But at Jefferson High, something had changed for good. Bullying reports dropped. Teachers paid attention. Students spoke up. The atmosphere felt lighter, more honest. During one of the final pep rallies of the year, Ariana stood on the field again, same uniform, same crowd, but everything was different. When she took center stage, the applause wasn't sarcastic or forced. It was real. After the performance, Coach Lang called her over. "You know," she said, "I've been doing this 20 years. Never seen a school turn around like this." Ariana smiled. "Guess they just needed a reminder." Lang nodded, eyes glistening. "Sometimes that's all it takes, one person brave enough to make everyone else look in the mirror." That night, the Coles ate dinner together for the first time without any interruptions, no reporters, no calls, no knocks at the door, just laughter, stories, and a shared sense of peace. Before bed, Ariana found her father sitting quietly on the porch watching the stars. "You still think heroes don't trend online?" she teased. He chuckled softly. "Still true. So what do you call someone who changes a school, a town, and maybe a few hearts?" He turned toward her, the porch light catching the faint smile in his eyes. "I call her my daughter." The first cold morning of January came with silence. Jefferson High stood under a pale gray sky, the football field crusted with frost. Winter break was over, and with it came a strange calm, the kind that always follows a storm. Ariana Cole walked through the hallways, her steps steady, her backpack light. Students greeted her, now real smiles, not the half-hearted ones from before. Posters of the Stand Tall initiative still hung near the main office, and under each one, handwritten notes from students read, "Thank you for speaking up. You made us braver." For the first time, Jefferson High felt like a school again. Until that afternoon, Coach Lang called an emergency team meeting. The cheerleaders gathered in the gym, still pulling off gloves and jackets. When the coach spoke, her voice trembled slightly. "I have an announcement. Effective next week, Chloe Patterson will be returning to Jefferson High. The room fell dead silent. No one spoke. No one even moved. Ariana felt her stomach tighten. Madison, sitting across from her, looked as if she'd seen a ghost. Coach Lang continued. It's part of the district's restorative education program. Her parents moved out of state for a few months, and the board decided to allow her to complete the term here, under supervision. Whispers filled the air instantly. She's coming back? After all that? Why would they allow that? Ariana stayed quiet, her heartbeat slow and deliberate. She didn't ask why. She already knew the answer. Second chances weren't gifts. They were tests. That evening, she told her father. Derek Cole didn't respond right away. He simply listened, arms folded, eyes narrowed in thought. When she finished, he asked one question. How do you feel about it? Ariana hesitated. Honestly? I don't know. Part of me's angry. Part of me just wants to move on. He nodded slowly. Then do both, she frowned. How do you do both? By remembering the past, he said softly, without letting it own you. He leaned back in his chair. People make mistakes, but forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's control. You decide what defines you, not them. She nodded, letting his words settle like calm water after a ripple. Chloe's return didn't come quietly. On Monday, a silver sedan pulled into the student lot, cameras flashing as she stepped out. Gone was the polished arrogance from months ago. Her hair was tied back, no makeup, her posture cautious. She avoided eye contact as she walked through the entrance. Whispers followed her down every hallway. That's her. She's back. Wonder if she'll apologize. By the time she reached homeroom, the tension was thick enough to cut. She sat in the back corner, notebook open but untouched. Every so often, her eyes flicked toward Ariana, the girl whose name had become a symbol. During lunch, Madison approached Ariana nervously. Did you know she was coming back? Ariana nodded. Coach told me. What are you going to do? Same thing I did before, Ariana said quietly. Keep standing. After school, Chloe waited near the exit doors. When Ariana walked past, she spoke, her voice small but steady. Can we talk? Ariana paused, measuring her tone. About what? Everything, Chloe said. Please. They stepped outside where the cold wind cut through their words. I came back because I wanted to say I'm sorry, Chloe began. Not because someone made me. Because I should have said it months ago. Ariana watched her carefully. Why now? Because I finally understand what I did, Chloe whispered. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't harmless. It was cruel, and I hate that it took me losing everything to see it. A long silence hung between them. Then Ariana spoke. You can't erase what happened, Chloe, but you can decide who you are now. Chloe nodded, eyes wet. I'm trying. Then start there, Ariana said, turning away. Just don't expect me to forget. That night, Derek heard about the conversation from Renee. He didn't say much, only she handled it better than most adults would. But something about Chloe's return unsettled him. He'd seen enough missions to know peace doesn't always stay permanent. Sometimes old tension hides beneath apologies, waiting for the wrong spark. So he kept watch, quietly, from a distance. A week later, that spark arrived. During a pep rally rehearsal, the squad practiced new stunts for the spring showcase. Chloe was assigned to assist with equipment, a position far from the spotlight. But when one of the younger cheerleaders tripped over a mat, laughter broke out from a group in the bleachers, boys from the football team. Ariana stepped forward instantly. That's enough, she called out. One of them snickered. Relax, Captain. Nobody's talking to you. The laughter grew. Then a voice came from behind her, soft but cutting through the noise. Knock it off, Chloe said. She's right. The boys went quiet, confused. Chloe turned to Ariana, meeting her eyes briefly before walking away. It was small, but real. And for the first time, Ariana realized that maybe redemption didn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it was just one person deciding to do better. Later that evening, a message popped up on Ariana's phone, a photo of her and Chloe during practice. Captioned, "Guess forgiveness looks good on you." No sender, just the same unknown number that had sent threats months ago. Her chest tightened. She immediately showed her father. Derek studied the screen, jaw tightening. Same number? Yeah. Then whoever this is didn't learn the first time. He called Mason immediately. Trace it again, he said. Mason groaned. You realize how many kids use disposable apps? Derek's tone sharpened. Then we traced the source, not the app. Within hours, Mason found the signal of a VPN-masked account connected to a nearby server used by local students. But what made Derek pause was the metadata. The timestamps matched a device logged in from inside Jefferson High after hours. Someone inside the building. The next morning, Derek met with Principal Collins. Who has after-hours access to the school network? Collins frowned. Only staff and maintenance. Why? Because someone's sending my daughter messages again and they're using your system to do it. Collins' face paled. Are you saying it's an employee? I'm saying it's someone comfortable here, Derek said. Someone who thinks they're untouchable. Collins promised to investigate. But Derek didn't wait. That night he parked near the back lot, his truck blending into the shadows. He wasn't there for revenge, only answers. At 9:47 p.m., a car pulled into the lot. A figure stepped out, hood up, backpack slung low. The person slipped through the side door using a staff card. Derek waited until the interior lights flickered on inside the computer lab. Then he called Mason. She's here, he said quietly. She? Mason asked. Student height. Moving like she knows the place. I'll keep eyes until you arrive. Minutes later, patrol cars pulled up without sirens. When officers entered, the figure froze and Derek finally saw her face. It wasn't Chloe. It was another cheerleader, Lena Holt, one of the girls who had laughed at the first pep rally. On her laptop were drafts of fake accounts, memes mocking Ariana, even scheduled posts under anonymous names. When they brought her out in cuffs, she looked terrified. I didn't mean any harm, she kept repeating. It was just supposed to be funny. Derek's voice was calm but firm. Humor stops being harmless the second it hurts someone else. By morning, the story broke again, this time smaller, quieter, but powerful. Second student caught continuing harassment. Jefferson High reinforces policy. The principal personally called the Coles to apologize. This time we won't let it slide, he promised. Ariana felt exhausted but relieved. I thought it was over, she said to her dad. It never really is, he replied gently. But now you know how to face it. The next week, the school board honored Ariana at a small assembly for her role in promoting reform. But she insisted on sharing the stage with someone else. When the curtain rose, she called Chloe forward. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Chloe hesitated, then stepped beside her. Ariana spoke into the microphone, her voice clear. We talk about standing tall, but we also have to talk about standing together. Sometimes the hardest part of change is believing people can. Chloe looked down, tears streaking her face. I was part of the problem, she said quietly. But if Ariana can stand here with me, maybe we can all start over. The audience rose to their feet. It wasn't applause of spectacle, it was solidarity. That evening, Derek watched the local news quietly. The reporter closed with a line that made him smile faintly. Jefferson High's story reminds us that courage doesn't end when justice is served. Sometimes it begins when forgiveness is given. Renee glanced at him. You think it's finally over? He exhaled slowly. Maybe not over, but better. That weekend, the Coles drove to the lake for the first time in months. No cameras, no questions, just calm. Ariana skipped stones across the glassy water while Derek watched from the dock. She turned to him. You ever think you'd be in a story like this? He chuckled. I was trained for missions overseas, not high school politics. So which was harder? He smiled. This one. Because winning battles is easy. Raising someone brave enough to face them, that's the real challenge. Ariana grinned. Guess we both passed. That night, as they drove home, Derek glanced in the mirror at his daughter sleeping peacefully in the back seat. For months, he'd carried the weight of protecting her from a world that could be cruel and careless. Now, for the first time, he realized she didn't need protecting anymore, just belief. The headlights stretched out ahead, cutting through the darkness like quiet proof that even after the worst storms, there's always a way forward, and this time, nobody could take that away from them. The snow outside Jefferson County melted into long streaks of silver, coating the roads like glass. Spring was coming slow but certain, and with it came invitations that neither Ariana nor her father expected. The first arrived in a plain white envelope from the State Youth Leadership Council. Dear Ms. Cole, we'd be honored if you would speak at our annual summit on courage and change. Ariana read the letter twice before handing it to Derek. They want me to talk in front of state officials, she said, half disbelieving. He scanned the page, then smiled faintly. Looks like you've been promoted, Captain. She laughed. Captain of a cheer squad, not the world. He folded the letter carefully. Doesn't matter what the title is. Leadership's leadership. The summit took place in downtown Richmond, polished marble floors, tall windows, and banners that read, Building Better Futures. Students from every district filled the seats, some nervous, some excited. Ariana waited backstage, smoothing the edges of her note cards. Derek stood nearby, dressed in a simple navy suit, hands clasped behind his back. Remember, he said quietly, you're not here to impress anyone. You're here to tell the truth. She nodded, inhaled deeply, and walked onto the stage. When she spoke, her voice didn't tremble. 6 months ago, I was afraid to go to school. I thought standing up would make me a target. But I learned that silence is just another kind of permission, and sometimes the only way to stop cruelty is to shine a light on it. Her words carried through the hall. Students leaned forward, parents nodded, teachers wiped their eyes. When she finished, the applause rose like thunder. Derek watched from the crowd, pride swelling quietly in his chest. But as he turned to leave, he noticed a man standing near the exit, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the subtle posture of someone trained to observe. The man met his gaze, nodded once, then disappeared into the corridor. Later that afternoon, as the conference emptied, Derek found a note tucked under his windshield wiper. Cole, long time. Meet me at Riverside Cafe at 1900S. He froze for a second. Only one person signed their notes that way, Samuel Briggs, his old SEAL teammate. The man he hadn't seen in over a decade. Renee saw his expression when he came home. Old friend? Old teammate, he said slowly. And if he's reaching out after all these years, it's not for coffee. The Riverside Cafe sat near the edge of the river, quiet and half-lit. Derek arrived early. Minutes later, Briggs walked in, older, gray at the temples, but still carrying that same quiet intensity. They shook hands like men who had both seen too much. Didn't think I'd find you playing PTA hero, Briggs said with a half-smile. Derek smirked. Didn't think I'd find you still breathing. Lucky break, Briggs said. Mind if I sit? They ordered black coffee, the kind both men could drink without thinking. After a few moments of silence, Briggs leaned forward. I caught your story on the news. Impressive stuff. But that's not why I'm here. Then why? Derek asked. Briggs lowered his voice. You remember Operation Fencer? Back in '09? Derek's jaw tightened. Hard to forget. One of the contractors from that mission, a guy named Carson Hale, he's working private security now. Lives right here in Jefferson County. Derek frowned. That name's supposed to mean something? Briggs nodded slowly. It should. He's Patterson's cousin. Derek's eyes narrowed. The same Patterson? The one you just took down in court, Briggs confirmed. Seems like your little high school scandal hit closer to home than you thought. He pulled a small photo from his pocket, grainy surveillance stills showing Hale leaving a local courthouse, phone in hand. Word is he's been sniffing around again, asking about you, your daughter, the case. Thought you'd want to know. Derek studied the image, his expression unreadable. Why tell me now? Because the past has a way of circling back, and if Hale's involved, it's never innocent. That night, Derek sat awake long after everyone had gone to bed. He opened an old locked box from the back of his closet. Inside were fragments of a life most people never knew he'd lived. Mission tags, coded maps, a folded patch from his SEAL unit. He hadn't thought about Fencer in years, a mission that ended with too many lies and too few survivors. And now somehow one of those names was tied to the man who'd tried to destroy his daughter's life. It wasn't coincidence. Not in his world. He called Mason first thing the next morning. Pull everything you can on a man named Carson Hale. Private contractor, mid-40s, operates out of Richmond. Mason groaned. You planning on starting another war, Derek? I'm planning on finishing one, he said quietly. Within 2 days, Mason sent a file. Hale had a long list of clients, private schools, wealthy families, even small-town security contracts. One of them was listed under Patterson Legal Group, signed just weeks before Robert Patterson's suspension. Derek exhaled slowly. The threads connected too cleanly to be coincidence. Patterson hadn't just acted out of arrogance. He'd had help someone feeding him digital access, maybe even those masked accounts from months ago. He turned to Renee. Remember that anonymous number that sent Ariana threats? It wasn't just students, she frowned. You think an adult was involved? I think someone was paid to make sure it didn't look like one. Later that week, Derek met Briggs again, this time in a park near the river. Got something, Derek said, handing him a folder. Patterson's law firm hired your old acquaintance. He handled their private IT work. Briggs whistled softly. That explains how the harassment stayed hidden so long. Derek nodded. And maybe why the post stopped when Patterson fell. Briggs's tone darkened. You planning to confront him? Derek's reply was measured. Not yet. First I find proof, then I let the law do what it's supposed to. Briggs grinned. Still the disciplined one. Discipline keeps people alive, Derek said, including my daughter. Meanwhile, Ariana's world kept expanding. Her speech at the summit had gone viral online. Schools across the country reached out to her for advice on starting loud room chapters. One afternoon, she sat on the living room floor surrounded by letter students from as far as Texas and Oregon, writing to say her story had changed theirs. She looked up at her mom. All this because of one cheer practice. Renee smiled. Because of how you responded. But even with the new attention, Ariana never forgot what her father always said: truth without humility can turn into ego. So she stayed grounded, focused, determined not to let fame distort the lesson. A week later, Mason called Derek with an update. Hale's gone quiet, he said. But someone tried to access the county evidence database using old police credentials last night. Derek's voice dropped. He's fishing for the files. Looks that way. Then he's not finished. He ended the call and sat in silence for a long moment. Renee entered the room, sensing his tension. Whatever this is, don't let it drag you back into that life, she said gently. He met her eyes. That life's the only reason I know how to keep ours safe. 2 nights later, his instincts proved right. As the Coles slept, motion sensors outside their home triggered softly. Derek moved quietly, his training automatic silent steps, steady breath, clear mind. Through the window, he spotted a shadow near the driveway, a figure crouched beside the mailbox. He opened the front door quietly, stepping out with measured calm. Whatever you're doing, he said, voice low, stop. The figure froze, then bolted toward the street. Derek sprinted after him, closing the gap easily. The man tripped over the curb, landing hard. Derek pinned him down before he could reach for anything. It wasn't Hale. It was a teenager, maybe 17, terrified, a local kid clutching a phone. The screen glowed with a message draft addressed to an account named CH Command. Derek scanned it quickly. Package delivered. Awaiting payment. He looked down at the boy. Who told you to do this? The kid stammered. I don't know his real name. Some guy online paid me to leave stuff at your house. Said it was a prank. Police arrived minutes later. The boy was released to his parents, but the phone stayed as evidence. Mason called again. We traced the account. IP leads straight to Richmond private network owned by Carson Hale. Derek didn't even sound surprised. Then it's time. By the end of that week, Mason's team and federal cybercrime officers raided Hale's office. Inside, they found multiple burner accounts, message histories, and payment logs linking back to Patterson's old firm. The harassment campaign against Ariana hadn't been random. It had been orchestrated, a calculated distraction to protect a network of digital fraud tied to school contracts. When the news broke, the headline read, Private contractor arrested in connection with harassment and fraud scheme. The public didn't know all the layers, the military connection, the personal vendetta, but Derek did. And that was enough. That evening, he stood in the backyard, hands in his pockets, staring at the horizon. Ariana joined him quietly. Mom says it's finally over, she said. He nodded. Mostly. Mostly, she echoed. He smiled faintly. Some battles end on paper. Others end when you decide to stop fighting them in your head. She leaned against him. Then I think we're done. He looked down at her, pride shining in his eyes. You're right. Weeks later, life slipped back into rhythm school. Laughter. Peace. Ariana's Loud Room initiative spread to 5 states. Derek accepted a consulting role for a national safety program. And the Cole family, once the subject of headlines, became a quiet symbol of perseverance. But what people didn't see was the small moment that mattered most. One afternoon, while visiting the new loud room on campus, Ariana found a folded note tucked under the keyboard. It read, "I was bullied once too. Your story made me tell someone." "Thank you," she smiled, folded it gently and placed it in her notebook not as a trophy, but as proof that pain could turn into purpose. That night, over dinner, Derek raised his glass of lemonade. "To second chances," he said. Renee grinned. "For everyone?" "For everyone who earns them," he replied. Ariana clinked her glass against his. "Guess that includes us too." He smiled. Always. Outside, the last traces of winter melted into evening light, clear, calm, and endless. The fight was over, the lesson lasting. And for the first time since it all began, peace didn't feel borrowed, it felt deserved. By the time spring came in full bloom, the Coles' lives had finally found rhythm again. The long months of chaos had faded into normal days filled with small routines: breakfast at the same table, Ariana humming to herself as she packed her bag, Derek reading the news with a steady eye, and Renee watering the porch flowers before work. But peace, Derek knew, was never permanent. It was a visitor that stayed only if you kept your doors guarded. That lesson came back to him one Friday morning, with a knock on the door. Renee opened it to find a tall man in a gray suit standing there, badge glinting under the sunlight. "Mr. Cole?" he asked. Derek stepped forward. "That's me. Special Agent Nolan Reese, Department of Defense Investigations Division. We'd like to talk." Renee's hand tensed around the doorknob. "Is this about the harassment case?" Reese shook his head. "Not exactly. May we come in?" Derek nodded, motioning toward the living room. "Go ahead." The agent took a seat, flipping open a leather folder. "You served under Task Force Delta, correct? Afghanistan, 2004 through 2010? "That's right. And you worked on Operation Fencer?" Derek's jaw tightened slightly. "Yes." "Why?" Reese leaned forward. "Because the contractor arrested in your daughter's harassment case, Carson Hale, is now part of a federal investigation involving data theft from former military systems. Some of the material he accessed traces back to missions under your unit." Derek's expression remained calm, but inside his chest, the old instinct snapped awake. "Are you saying he breached classified systems?" Reese nodded. "Yes, and there's reason to believe he used private domestic conflicts to cover his tracks, including what happened at Jefferson High." Renee blinked, shocked. "You mean that bullying case wasn't random?" Reese sighed. "Ma'am, I can't say it was planned entirely, but Hale's involvement wasn't coincidence. He used digital harassment to divert attention while extracting old encrypted files through local servers. Your husband's history made your family a convenient target." The room fell silent. Ariana, listening from the staircase, felt a chill crawl up her spine. "So we were a distraction?" she asked softly. Reese turned toward her, guilt flickering across his face. "In a way, yes. But you exposed him, and that exposure stopped a breach that could have gone much higher." Derek exhaled slowly. He underestimated one thing. Reese looked up. "What's that?" "My daughter," Derek said evenly. He thought she was an easy target. After Reese left, the family sat quietly around the table, the weight of what they'd heard pressing down. Ariana stared at her father. "Does this mean you're in danger again?" He shook his head. "Not the kind you think. This time the danger's being dragged back into a world I walked away from." Renee touched his hand. "Then stay out of it, Derek. You've done enough." He gave a small nod but didn't promise, because deep down he knew that loose ends never stayed buried, not in his world. Over the following days, the story of the hidden data breach made quiet waves online, though few people connected it to the Coles. But inside the DoD's secure offices, Derek's name was whispered again, not as a suspect, but as someone who'd unknowingly stopped something far bigger. That's when the second call came. This time, from someone he never thought he'd hear from again. Admiral Wyatt Bennett, his former commanding officer. "Cole, the Admiral said, voice gravelly but warm. You've been busy. Derek chuckled softly. Didn't mean to make headlines, sir. Don't sell yourself short. You saved us a national headache. That contractor Hale had access to ghost archives. If he'd sold them, we'd have had more than embarrassment on our hands. So what now? We're closing it, Bennett said. And we could use your help reviewing a few protocols, off the record, just like old times. Derek hesitated. I'm not coming back. Didn't ask you to, Bennett replied. Just wanted to say you did good. Even out of uniform. For the first time in years, Derek allowed himself a small, honest smile. Thank you, Admiral. Meanwhile, Ariana's life kept accelerating. Her school had nominated her for the National Youth Bravery Award, a program recognizing young leaders across the country. When she got the letter, she ran straight to the kitchen, waving it in the air. They picked me, she shouted. Renee hugged her tight. You deserve it, baby. Derek smiled. Looks like we're going to D.C. But with the recognition came pressure interviews, profiles, panels. Ariana handled them with poise beyond her years, always turning the focus from herself to the issue. It's not about me, she said during one televised segment. It's about making sure no one feels invisible again. Her words reached further than she realized. Weeks later, she received a message through the Loud Room's online platform. It was from a girl in Illinois. I showed your video to my mom. She finally believed me about what's happening at my school. Thank you. Ariana read it 3 times before replying. You did the hard part, you spoke up. I'm proud of you. Renee watched her daughter typing responses late into the night. You can't help everyone, sweetheart, she said gently. I know, Ariana answered, but I can try. Back in town, Mason met Derek for coffee. So, hero of Jefferson County, Mason joked. What's next? Peace and quiet, Derek said dryly. Not your style. He smirked. Maybe it's time to make it my style. But Mason leaned forward. You realize, right? What you did, it changed how the county handles cyberbullying and harassment cases. The FBI even cited your evidence trail in a new protocol draft. Derek chuckled. Guess old habits die hard. Mason raised his cup. To new habits, then. Derek clinked his against it. And old friends. A few weeks later, Ariana stood on the stage of a grand hotel ballroom in Washington, D.C. Dozens of students, parents, and officials filled the hall. When her name was called, she walked to the podium in a simple navy dress, her confidence radiant. The presenter said, for her courage in standing against systemic bullying and inspiring change nationwide, Ariana Cole. Applause filled the room. Cameras flashed. She glanced toward the audience, her parents sitting side by side, proud and still. Derek's expression didn't show much, but she saw it in his eyes, that quiet glow that said, you did it. When it was her turn to speak, she paused for a moment before beginning. Sometimes courage doesn't look like what you see in movies. It's not loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's a quiet decision to get up when the world tells you to stay down. Her voice wavered just slightly. I used to wish someone would protect me. But I learned that the best protection isn't walls, it's truth. The audience gave her a standing ovation. After the ceremony, a reporter asked Derek, Mr. Cole, as a Navy veteran, how does it feel seeing your daughter become a national voice for change? He smiled faintly. I've seen heroes in every form, soldiers, medics, teachers, but the bravest ones are kids who face cruelty and refuse to return it. That quote aired across the evening news. Within days, the Coles were invited to the White House's education panel on youth safety reform. Renee laughed when the invitation came in. From viral scandal to national stage, we've come a long way. Derek grinned. Not bad for a family that just wanted to be left alone. A month later, as they sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Ariana turned to her father. You ever think about going back, like the Navy? He smiled. No, the mission's different now. What's the mission? He looked out at the horizon. Making sure the next kid doesn't need a Navy SEAL to defend them. She nodded, thoughtful. Guess that makes you a different kind of soldier. He laughed softly. Maybe. Then she added, and I guess that makes me one too. He smiled wider. Definitely. That summer, the Stand Tall initiative went statewide. Ariana was invited to consult on youth outreach programs. Her story became part of a training video shown to teachers across Virginia. At Jefferson High, a mural was painted near the gym entrance, a silhouette of a cheerleader standing tall beneath the words, "Courage is contagious." The principal invited Ariana to see it before the unveiling. When she walked into the gym, she stopped, eyes glistening. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Collins nodded. "It's your legacy," but she shook her head. "No, it's everyone's." Later that evening, Derek received one last call from Admiral Bennett. "Just thought you'd like to know," the Admiral said. "Operation Fencer has been permanently sealed. The files your daughter helped stop from leaking are secure." Derek smiled. "Good to hear. You've done your country proud again, Cole, this time without a uniform." "Thank you, sir." After hanging up, Derek looked out the window where Ariana sat laughing with her mother. He thought about the chain of events, how one act of cruelty had uncovered something far larger, and how his daughter's courage had ended what his military discipline never could. He realized then that sometimes the greatest missions weren't fought overseas. They were fought quietly in classrooms, homes, and hearts where strength wasn't measured by rank, but by resilience. That night, Ariana wrote a single line in her journal. Maybe courage isn't learned. Maybe it's remembered, passed down from people who never stopped standing. She closed the book, turned off the lamp, and drifted to sleep, finally at peace, finally free. Outside, Derek stepped onto the porch, the night air cool against his skin. He looked up at the stars, distant, unwavering, like the calm before dawn. In that moment, he understood something simple but profound. The mission never really ends. It just changes shape. And this time it wore a cheer uniform, a quiet smile, and his last name. The warmth of summer carried a different kind of tension, one built not from fear, but from expectation. Everywhere Ariana Cole went, people seemed to know her name. Teachers introduced her with pride. Strangers recognized her in grocery aisles, and classmates whispered her story like folklore. At first it felt good. Then it started to feel heavy. She couldn't walk through the school halls without someone asking for advice, or a reporter requesting just 5 minutes. Even her social media accounts overflowed with messages, some grateful, some cruel, some confused. The world had turned her life into a symbol. And symbols, she realized, don't get to rest. One afternoon, Madison approached her in the cafeteria, tray in hand. "Hey, Captain. You good?" Ariana forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." Madison sat down. "I get it. Everybody wants a piece of you." Ariana shrugged. "It's weird. They cheer for me now, but they didn't see the nights I cried." Madison looked down. "I did, I just didn't say anything." That truth landed hard. Ariana nodded quietly. "Then say something now. Speak up for someone else." Madison's eyes softened. "You really never stop, do you?" "Not until people stop pretending this stuff's rare," Ariana said. At home, Derek noticed the change. Ariana still smiled, but her laughter carried fatigue. One evening, he found her sitting on the porch steps, scrolling through her phone. "Another interview?" he asked. "2," she murmured. "And a podcast. And a foundation email asking me to be their youth ambassador." He sat beside her. "You don't have to say yes to everyone." "They think I owe them," she said quietly. "Like, because I survived, I have to stay strong forever." Derek leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Courage isn't permanent, kid. It's rented day by day. You pay for it by showing up, but you also earn rest." She looked at him, tears forming. "Then how do I tell people no without letting them down?" "You don't," he said softly. "You teach them what enough looks like." But not everyone around her understood that boundary. Some classmates began whispering that Ariana acted famous. One even posted online, "Guess standing up gets you scholarships now." The words hit harder than she wanted to admit. For the first time in months, she felt small again, like the world had circled back to remind her she didn't belong. That night, she shut her laptop and walked into the kitchen. "Dad, maybe I should stop doing interviews. People think I'm showing off." He looked up from the sink. "You're not responsible for how cowards see you. But if quitting helps you breathe, quit. Just make sure it's your choice, not theirs." A week later, the local paper ran an article titled, From Target to Trailblazer, the girl who changed Jefferson High. The story was kind, but it reignited old debates online. Anonymous commenters resurfaced the past, twisting details, posting half-truths. Renee wanted to call the editor. Derek stopped her. "Let the noise burn itself out," he said. "Truth doesn't need to argue." Still, the tension spread through their small town again. Some parents claimed the school overreacted after the scandal, blaming Ariana's fame for stricter policies. Others defended her. The same people who once ignored the problem now argued about who fixed it. Meanwhile, Chloe Patterson, quiet, humbled, genuinely changed, approached Ariana one afternoon near the gym. "Hey," she said softly. "You holding up?" Ariana blinked. "You're asking me?" Chloe nodded. "You forgave me before anyone forgave you. The least I can do is check in." Ariana exhaled, half smiling. "I didn't forgive you to be noble. I forgave you so I could live." Chloe nodded. "That's why I came back. To live right this time." They stood in silence for a moment, two girls who had once been enemies now linked by the same scar. "People still talk about us," Chloe said. "They always will," Ariana replied. "Let them. Stories fade slower than gossip." That evening, Derek got a call from Admiral Bennett again. "You keeping busy, Cole?" Derek chuckled. "Trying to stay retired." "Well, you'll appreciate this," Bennett said. "The DoD's drafting a family resilience program for veterans' kids. They want to use your case as a model." Derek hesitated. "Mine? Your daughter's, technically. But your approach, the balance between discipline and empathy, it's exactly what we need in the civilian sector." For a moment, Derek didn't speak. He wasn't used to being recognized for his heart instead of his strength. Finally, he said, "Tell them I'll help," quietly. Bennett laughed. "You never change." Later that week, Ariana was invited to appear at a regional youth summit. But when she arrived, she noticed the event felt different, flashier, louder, commercialized. Her name was printed on banners, her photo splashed across screens. During a rehearsal, one of the organizers said, "When you mention your dad being a Navy SEAL, can you make it sound more dramatic?" Audiences love that. Ariana froze. "I'm not here to sell drama." "It's not drama," the woman said quickly. "It's emotion. It inspires donors." Ariana smiled politely, then stepped away. She called her father that night. "Dad," she said, "they're turning it into a show." "What do you want to do?" "I want to tell the truth my way." "Then do it," he said simply. "You never needed permission." The next morning, she walked on stage, ignored the scripted teleprompter, and spoke from memory. "Everyone keeps asking what courage costs," she began. "But maybe the real question is, what does silence cost? Because that's the bill most people never see until it's too late." Her words hung in the air. No dramatic music, no bright lights, just raw honesty. The crowd went quiet, then erupted in applause. Afterward, one of the organizers whispered, "That wasn't what we rehearsed." Ariana smiled. "That's because I don't perform pain. I survived it." When she got home that evening, Derek was waiting on the porch. "I watched the live stream," he said. She laughed. "Let me guess you think I broke protocol." He grinned. "You made your own." She sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever miss being in command?" she asked. He looked out at the street. "Sometimes. But watching you lead reminds me I never really stopped." "So you're proud?" Beyond words. But as summer turned to fall, the pressure returned in subtle ways. Ariana's school counselor called her in one morning. "College recruiters want to feature your story in their diversity brochures," the counselor said. Ariana blinked. "I thought they cared about grades." "They care about what looks good," the counselor said bluntly. "And right now you look good for them." That night, Ariana told her parents. Renee was furious. "They're using her." Derek stayed calm. "Then she uses them back. You take what you need, education, opportunity, and leave them the headlines." Ariana smiled softly. "Guess that's strategic warfare, huh?" He chuckled. "Call it survival tactics." Meanwhile, Chloe had been working quietly with the Loud Room initiative, helping younger students feel safe reporting harassment. One day, she showed Ariana a message from a freshman girl thanking her for listening. "I never thought helping someone could feel this good," Chloe said. Ariana smiled. "That's what redemption feels like." Chloe nodded. "You think people ever forget what I did?" "Maybe not," Ariana said. "But they'll remember what you're doing now." As months passed, Jefferson High grew calmer, kinder, and strangely unified. The same hallways once filled with whispers now carried laughter. Teachers used Ariana's story as a case study in resilience. Students volunteered for anti-bullying programs. And yet, Derek sometimes caught himself wondering had they paid too high a price for all this peace. He watched Ariana balancing homework, interviews, and leadership meetings, her youthful ease replaced by responsibility. One evening, he finally asked her, "Do you ever wish it never happened?" She thought for a long moment. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I remember the kids writing to me from other schools. If it hadn't happened, maybe they'd still be scared." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe that's the cost of courage. You lose a piece of peace so others can find theirs." She looked up. "Is that how it felt in the Navy?" He smiled faintly. "Exactly." That night, Derek wrote in his own notebook a habit he'd picked up from watching Ariana journal. "She carries the same strength I once needed armor to hide." Maybe courage doesn't skip generations, it evolves. He closed the notebook and placed it beside her first cheer uniform, folded neatly in a box. It wasn't just fabric anymore. It was history stitched in thread and tears. By early winter, Ariana received one final invitation of the year this time, not from reporters or politicians, but from Jefferson High itself. The school wanted her to speak at the graduation ceremony. She hesitated. "What would I even say?" Coach Lang smiled. "Say what you wish someone had told you the day you almost gave up." On graduation night, she stood before hundreds of students, parents, and teachers. Her voice carried steady across the gym. "Courage doesn't erase fear, it walks with it. And the people who hurt you can't decide your ending. Only you can." Derek felt tears sting his eyes for the first time in years. Renee squeezed his hand. "She's yours through and through." He nodded. "And better." That night, the Coles celebrated quietly at home. No reporters, no speeches, just a family around a kitchen table filled with laughter. As the clock neared midnight, Ariana looked at her father. "Dad, you ever think about what all this cost us?" He thought for a long moment. "Maybe it cost peace, but it bought change." "And change," he said softly, "is worth every bruise." She smiled. "Then we're rich," he laughed. "Yeah, the right kind of rich." Outside, a cool wind rustled the trees, carrying away the last fragments of pain the family had endured. And in their place, only strength remained, quiet, steady, and unbreakable. The morning Ariana Cole left for college felt heavier than it should have. Boxes lined the living room floor, labeled in Renee's careful handwriting, dorm essentials. Winter clothes, books. Outside, Derek loaded the last one into the trunk, moving slower than usual, not from age, but from thought. "Feels like I blinked," he said quietly. "One minute you were learning cartwheels, the next you're leading assemblies." Ariana smiled, hugging him tightly. "You raised me to move forward, remember?" He chuckled. "Didn't realize how fast forward could be." Renee handed Ariana a small envelope. "Open it when you're homesick." Ariana tucked it into her bag. "You mean tomorrow?" They all laughed, but underneath it, there was that ache every parent knows, the mix of pride and loss that comes with letting go. Jefferson University sat 3 hours away, a mid-sized campus shaded by oak trees and history. When Ariana arrived, students recognized her instantly. "You're that girl, right?" one asked in the dining hall. "Yeah," another whispered. "The Navy SEAL's daughter." She smiled politely, but inside she longed for anonymity. For once, she wanted to be just Ariana, not the headline. Her roommate, a journalism major named Leah, sensed it early. "So should I pretend I don't know who you are?" she asked with a grin. Ariana laughed. "That would be nice." "Done," Leah said. "You're officially just the girl with too many notebooks." It was the first time in months Ariana felt normal again. Back home, Derek struggled with the quiet. The house, once filled with Ariana's energy, now echoed with absence. Renee noticed it the second evening. "You keep checking your phone like she's in danger," she teased gently. He smiled faintly. "Old habit. She's fine, Derek. You taught her how to be." But he couldn't shake the restlessness. Years of service had wired him to respond, protect, act. Now there was no mission, only stillness. That changed one afternoon when Mason called. "You still bored out there?" "Define bored," Derek said. "I've got something for you," Mason replied. "Community centers launching a youth mentorship program. They need structure, discipline. the kind only a certain ex-SEAL can provide. Derek hesitated, then smiled. Text me the address. The next week, he walked into the Jefferson County Youth Center for the first time. Graffiti lined the walls, basketballs bounced somewhere in the distance, and a group of teenagers eyed him with skeptical curiosity. One of them muttered, "He looks strict." Another whispered, "Bet he was in the army or something." Derek smiled slightly. "Close enough," he said. He didn't start with speeches. He started with trust. Push-ups became conversations. Drills turned into discipline lessons, and slowly, the teens began showing up on time not because they feared him, but because they respected him. One boy, Jameer, reminded him of Ariana at 16, quiet, watchful, carrying more weight than a kid should. One day, Derek found him sitting alone after class. "Trouble at home?" Derek asked. Jameer shrugged. "My stepdad says I'm useless." Derek's tone softened. "Then prove him wrong. Not for him, for you." Jameer nodded slowly, and for the first time Derek saw light behind the guarded eyes. Meanwhile, college life shaped Ariana in ways she hadn't expected. She joined the campus journalism club but refused interviews about her past. "I want to write stories that help, not just stories that headline," she told Leah. Her first article, "Listening is the Loudest Form of Courage," spread across campus within days. Professors praised it. Students quoted it on social media. One evening, she received an email from her former principal, Mr. Collins. "Your piece is being added to our new freshman orientation packet." Proud doesn't begin to cover it. She smiled, closed her laptop, and whispered, "Guess the story still works." Back home, Derek's mentorship program grew quickly. Local news covered it once, calling him the quiet commander. When a reporter asked for a quote, he said simply, "Kids don't need heroes, they need examples." Word spread, and soon the community center had a wait list. Renee teased him, "You've started another movement." He laughed. "I just teach them what the Navy taught me: show up, do the work, don't quit." But deep down, he knew what really drove him wasn't discipline, it was legacy. He wanted these kids to see in themselves what Ariana had finally learned: power without cruelty, courage without noise. One Friday evening, Ariana surprised her parents with a weekend visit. The moment she stepped through the door, Derek's whole demeanor softened. "You didn't say you were coming," he said. "I wanted to see if you missed me." Renee laughed. "He's been pretending not to." They ate dinner together, Renee's cornbread, Derek's favorite chili, Ariana's laughter filling the kitchen again. Halfway through the meal, Derek said, "You know that mentorship thing? It's turning into something bigger. The county wants to expand it." Ariana smiled. "That's amazing. You should call it Stand Tall Training." He raised an eyebrow. "You naming my program now?" "Someone has to," she teased. "You're bad at branding." Later that night, father and daughter sat on the porch, the same spot where so many of their hardest talks had started. "You seem lighter," Derek said. "I feel it," she admitted. "College is different. Hard but healing. You made peace with your story?" She nodded. "Yeah, I used to think courage was something you use once like a weapon. But I think it's more like breathing. You don't notice you're doing it until someone tries to take it away." He smiled. "That's wisdom most people take decades to find." She nudged him. "Guess it runs in the family." Weeks turned into months, and Stand Tall Training became a countywide pilot program. Derek spoke at civic meetings, schools, even juvenile centers. One of his trainees, Jameer, stood beside him during one session, sharing his story about finding purpose through mentorship. Afterward, Jameer whispered, "I used to think people like you didn't care about people like me." Derek clapped him on the shoulder. "Now you know better." That moment reminded Derek of something Admiral Bennett once told him. Real soldiers don't retire. They just change the battlefield. He finally understood what that meant. Meanwhile, Ariana received an invitation from her university to host a seminar on youth leadership. She titled her talk, "The Weight of Being Seen." When Leah asked what that meant, Ariana smiled. "It's about how recognition isn't reward, it's responsibility." During her speech, she said, "Sometimes people will praise you for surviving what they ignored. Forgive them, but don't let them forget." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that means every word landed exactly where it was meant to. A few weeks later, Ariana came home again for Thanksgiving. This time she brought someone new, a freshman named Daniel, a kind-eyed young man who volunteered at a local shelter. Derek sized him up instantly. "So," he said with a faint smile, "you the one who got my daughter talking about sociology instead of cheer routines?" Daniel laughed nervously. "Sir, I just ask good questions." Renee hid her smile behind her glass of water. Ariana rolled her eyes. "Dad, stop scaring him." "I'm not," Derek said, still half smiling. "Just observing." By the end of dinner, Derek's teasing had softened into quiet approval. Later, he told Renee, "He listens." "That's rare," Renee nodded. "You learned to listen too." He thought about it and smiled. Maybe that's her legacy to me. Winter arrived with soft snow and new beginnings. Ariana's article was published in a national youth magazine. Derek's mentorship model was adopted by 3 neighboring counties. The Coles no longer lived under the shadow of what happened, they lived beyond it. One Sunday, they attended a dedication ceremony at the community center. A new plaque hung on the wall. The Stand Tall initiative founded in honor of Ariana Cole. Beneath it were the words, "For teaching us that courage doesn't shout, it stands." When Derek saw it, he felt a lump rise in his throat. He turned to his daughter. "You know, when you fell at that rally, I thought the worst day of our lives had started." She looked up at him. "Maybe it did, but it turned into something better." He nodded, eyes misting. "You turned it into something better." That evening after the ceremony, they drove home through quiet streets blanketed in snow. Ariana looked out the window, watching the lights blur by. "Dad," she said softly. "Yeah?" "When I was little, you used to say, 'Control the breath, control the fear.' I think I finally get it." He glanced at her, smiling. "Took you long enough." "It's not about being fearless," she said. "It's about remembering who you are when you're afraid." He nodded. "Exactly," she smiled to herself. "Guess that's our family motto now." He chuckled. "Could be worse." That night, Derek couldn't sleep. He went out to the porch, the same place he'd sat the night of the first rally. The stars looked clearer somehow, sharper against the winter sky. He thought about every battle he'd fought on land, in courtrooms, in his own heart, and realized something simple yet profound. Courage isn't inherited like medals or names. It's learned, practiced, shared. And once passed on, it never dies, it multiplies. Inside the house, he heard Renee laugh softly at something Ariana said. He smiled, whispering to the quiet night. Mission accomplished. 10 years passed quietly, the way only healed lives can move without noise, without apology. Jefferson High had changed so much that few students even remembered the scandal that once defined it. The walls had been repainted, the gym rebuilt, the cheer squad restructured. But every spring, on the anniversary of the Stand Tall initiative, the school held one assembly that reminded everyone how the movement began. And this year, the guest speaker returning to the stage was none other than Ariana Cole. She was 26 now, still calm, still poised, her voice carrying that same steady conviction that once silenced an entire gym of hecklers. Her hair was shorter, her eyes wiser. She'd finished college, earned a degree in communications, and worked full-time in youth advocacy, traveling from city to city, teaching schools how to protect the unseen. But Jefferson was different. It wasn't just another stop on her calendar. It was home. When her car pulled into the parking lot that morning, the old bleachers still faced east toward the rising sun. She sat for a moment, remembering. The laughter. The fall, the sting. Then she smiled faintly. "Full circle," she whispered. Inside the auditorium, hundreds of students waited, chattering with curiosity. Few had any idea that the woman they were about to meet was once a scared sophomore who'd nearly walked away from everything. Principal Collins, grayer now but no less kind, took the microphone first. "Students," he said, "our next guest once stood right where you do now. She turned pain into purpose, and we're honored to welcome her home." Applause filled the room. Ariana stepped onto the stage. She began softly. "I was 16 when I learned that silence protects the wrong people." The room stilled. "I thought speaking up would make me smaller, but it made me stronger. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I finally stopped letting fear decide my story." Her words flowed like water, measured, warm, precise. She spoke of forgiveness, resilience, and responsibility. Of how courage doesn't end when applause starts, it begins again the next day when no one's watching. And then she told them what her father had always said. Control the breath. Control the fear. The auditorium went silent. Students hung on every word. Teachers leaned forward, some wiping tears. Ariana smiled gently. My dad taught me that strength isn't about fighting. It's about staying steady when the world isn't fair. You can't always choose what happens, but you can always choose who you become after. When she finished, the room erupted, not in noise, but in something quieter respect. Outside, Derek and Renee stood near the doors, watching from a distance. He was older now, hair silver at the edges, but his posture still held that quiet command. When Ariana spotted them, she ran down the steps, hugging them both tightly. I saw you hiding, she said with a grin. Renee laughed. We didn't want to steal your spotlight. Derek smiled. Spotlight's yours now. As they walked through the halls together, students stopped to shake Ariana's hand, thanking her for inspiring them. Coach Lang, retired but visiting for the day, met her near the gym entrance. Still leading with heart, I see, she said warmly. Ariana smiled. You started that. They stood beneath the mural still there, still bright, of a cheerleader standing tall under the words, Courage is contagious. Ariana traced the edge of the lettering with her fingers. I used to think courage was rare, she said. But it's everywhere. People just forget how to use it. Lang nodded, and you reminded them. Later that afternoon, the school hosted a small luncheon in Ariana's honor. Among the guests was Chloe Patterson, now a guidance counselor at another high school. When Ariana saw her, she froze for a moment, then smiled. Chloe approached, nervous but sincere. I've been following your work, she said quietly. I tell your story to my students, but I always tell them my part too. The wrong part. Ariana nodded. That's the part they need most. Chloe exhaled. I never thanked you. Not for forgiving me, for letting me live past my mistake. You did that yourself, Ariana said gently. Forgiveness just gave you permission. They hugged, years of tension dissolving in one quiet moment. The photographers nearby caught the embrace, two women once divided by cruelty, now united by growth. That picture would later appear on local news with the headline, Enemies No More, a lesson in true redemption. Back at home that evening, Derek sat on the porch while Ariana and Renee cooked inside. He looked out at the horizon, same porch, same view, but his world was different now. From the sound of laughter through the window, he could tell. Peace wasn't just visiting anymore. It had moved in. A knock at the gate interrupted his thoughts. It was Jameer, the boy from his first mentorship class, now a young police cadet. Evening, Commander, Jameer said, smiling. Just Derek, he replied. What brings you by? Jameer handed him a folded letter. They asked me to give you this. The county's naming the new youth center after you. Derek unfolded it, his expression softening as he read the words. The Derek Cole Community Center for Leadership and Courage. He laughed quietly. Didn't see that one coming. Jameer grinned. You earned it? Maybe, Derek said. But I'd rather it carry both our names. He scribbled a note at the bottom. Add Ariana's too. Jameer smiled. She's gonna love that. Inside, Ariana joined him on the porch later, holding 2 mugs of cocoa, just like years before. Mom says you're thinking too much again, she teased. Maybe, he said. Thinking about how small moments turn into legacies. She sat beside him, sipping her drink. Legacies start with mistakes, don't they? He nodded. And end with what we do after them. She looked at him for a long moment. Dad, do you ever miss it? The missions, the adrenaline? He smiled. Sometimes. But this watching you change the world one kid at a time, that's the best mission I've ever had. She laughed softly. Guess I inherited the job. He nudged her shoulder. You improved it. Months later, the dedication ceremony for the Cole Center drew hundreds. Community leaders, students, and families gathered as Derek and Ariana cut the ribbon together. When it was Ariana's turn to speak, she said, This building isn't named for one family. It's for every kid who's ever felt unseen, and every parent who refused to stop fighting for them. The crowd rose in applause. Derek stood quietly behind her, proud beyond words. After the ceremony, a young girl about 12 ran up to Ariana. Ms. Cole, can I tell you something? Of course. I get bullied a lot. But when I saw your video in class, I stopped crying. I just kept saying, control the breath, control the fear. And it worked. Ariana knelt, eyes warm. Then you're already stronger than you think. The girl smiled shyly and hugged her. Watching from a few feet away, Derek felt his throat tighten. He realized this was the true legacy, not plaques or speeches, but the quiet transfer of strength from one life to another. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Renee raised her glass. "To the Coles," she said, "for turning pain into purpose." Ariana clinked hers against her father's. "And for teaching the world what standing tall really means." Derek chuckled. "If I'd known all it took to make history was surviving high school, I'd have retired sooner." They laughed, the sound warm and familiar. Later that night, when everyone else was asleep, Derek stepped outside once more. The stars hung steady above Jefferson County, the same stars he'd watched years ago when fear was still fresh. He thought about every step since then. The rally, the courtroom, the mentorships, the forgiveness, the peace. And he whispered the same words he'd once told his daughter. Control the breath. Control the fear. Then he added something new. Let go. The next morning, a headline appeared in the local paper. A decade later, Jefferson High's lesson still inspires a nation. The article ended with a quote from Ariana. "Courage doesn't end when the fight ends. It ends when you stop believing it matters. And I don't plan to stop." Years from now, long after the headlines fade, students at Jefferson High will still learn about the girl who stood up, the father who stood behind her, and the community that finally stood together. And somewhere in the halls, that mural will still shine under the morning light, the words, "Courage is contagious," glimmering like a promise kept. Because in the end, what began as cruelty became something far greater. A story about family, faith, and the strength to rise after the fall. And in that small town, on that old football field where it all began, the legacy of Ariana and Derek Cole would live on, quiet, steadfast, and unbreakable.